April 18, 1945. Near the Elbe River, Germany. The operations tent had gone unnaturally quiet. Outside, engines rumbled through mud that had swallowed half the convoy. Rain drummed against canvas roofs while exhausted American soldiers shuffled between radio trucks carrying maps already stained with dirt, coffee, and too many corrections. Inside, every officer in the headquarters leaned over a massive campaign map marked with colored pins and grease pencil lines. Then a young radio operator stopped writing. Private First Class Daniel Mercer stared at the latest artillery coordinates arriving through his headset. He checked them once. Then again. His stomach tightened. Something wasn't right. Another transmission repeated the numbers. A nearby lieutenant looked up impatiently. "What's the delay?" Mercer swallowed. "Sir. I believe these coordinates are wrong." Several officers barely looked at him. The lieutenant frowned. "Read them again." Mercer did. Silence followed. Then one captain shook his head. "Those came directly from division." Mercer slowly lowered the paper. "Yes, sir. But if we fire there..." He looked toward the map. "We'll be hitting our own advance." The room suddenly felt much smaller. No one moved. No one wanted to be the first to admit a frightened 22-year-old radio operator might have just challenged the work of men with decades of experience. The tension lingered like smoke after an explosion. Outside, unaware of the debate unfolding inside headquarters, American infantry continued pushing toward the next German defensive line. They were marching directly toward the coordinates now sitting on Mercer's desk. Captain Robert Hensley stepped closer. "Private, are you absolutely certain?" Mercer's hands trembled slightly. "No, sir." Then he met the captain's eyes. "But I'm certain enough that I'd never forgive myself if I stayed quiet." The words hung heavily in the air. No one laughed. No one spoke. Within minutes, runners carried revised reports between communications trucks. Telephone operators checked field lines. Signal officers compared coded messages received from neighboring divisions. Every answer only created more confusion. One message confirmed the coordinates. Another contradicted them. A third suggested a transcription error somewhere between Corps headquarters and the artillery batteries. Lieutenant Harold Briggs rubbed his forehead. "If the private is wrong, we delay the barrage." He looked toward the map. "If he's right..." No one finished the sentence. Everyone already knew. Hundreds of American soldiers were advancing into the danger zone. Colonel James Ellsworth entered moments later after hearing raised voices. "What happened?" Captain Hensley explained. The colonel studied Mercer for several seconds. "Who trained you?" "Fort Benning, sir." "Ever corrected headquarters before?" "No, sir." "You understand what you're accusing this staff of?" Mercer answered honestly. "No, sir. I'm saying I think someone copied one number wrong." The colonel folded his arms. "You realize delaying artillery could cost lives too?" "Yes, sir." Again, silence. The colonel finally turned toward communications. "Verify every relay station." Runners sprinted into the rain. Radio operators adjusted frequencies. Maps were spread across additional tables. The headquarters transformed into organized chaos. Every minute mattered. Outside, Sergeant William Carter watched infantry disappear into low fog. "They're almost there." Nobody answered him. Farther ahead, the soldiers themselves had no idea dozens of officers were now arguing over 6 digits on a sheet of paper. Private Leo Ramirez joked with another rifleman about hot coffee waiting after the mission. Corporal Eddie Novak laughed weakly. Neither knew those coordinates placed artillery almost directly on their route. Back inside headquarters, another coded message arrived. Mercer copied every number carefully. His pencil suddenly stopped. His eyes widened. There. Everyone looked. The fourth digit changed. Captain Hensley leaned closer. Mercer compared the earlier message. One number. Only one. A handwritten 6 had become an 8 during relay. The difference shifted the impact zone nearly 2 miles. Directly onto friendly troops. The tent fell silent again. Lieutenant Briggs whispered almost to himself. My God! Colonel Ellsworth wasted no time. Countermand the fire mission. Signalmen transmitted new orders across multiple frequencies. Operators repeated every number twice. Artillery batteries acknowledged. Then came the longest 2 minutes anyone in headquarters could remember. No one knew whether the cancellation had arrived in time. Every face remained fixed on the radios. Finally. Static. Then a calm voice. Fire mission halted. Awaiting corrected target. Several men closed their eyes in relief. One sergeant quietly sat down on an ammunition crate because his knees suddenly felt weak. Mercer simply exhaled. He hadn't realized he'd been holding his breath. Hours later, corrected artillery destroyed an actual German defensive position without striking American forces. The infantry continued advancing. Many never learned how close they had come to disaster. The incident should have ended there. Normally it would have. But military headquarters had another problem. Someone had introduced the incorrect number. No one knew where. Over the next day, investigators retraced every transmission through multiple command posts. Radio logs. Telephone records. Messenger reports. Each revealed tiny human decisions made under enormous pressure. A clerk writing too quickly. A weary corporal copying coordinates during shellfire. A signal station forced to relocate after German artillery landed nearby. No sabotage emerged. Only exhaustion. War had nearly turned one tired hand into a catastrophe. Word quietly spread throughout the headquarters. The radio operator caught it. Some praised him. Others weren't impressed. He embarrassed senior officers. He spoke out in front of everyone. He could have waited. Sergeant Frank Delaney overheard those conversations. He didn't embarrass anybody. He saved people. Still, opinions remained divided. Military discipline depended upon respecting rank. Yet survival often depended upon questioning mistakes. Neither truth canceled the other. Late the following afternoon, another convoy approached headquarters. Dust rose behind polished staff vehicles. Military police straightened immediately. Drivers stood at attention. General George S. Patton had arrived. Conversations ended almost instantly. Boots clicked together. The entire headquarters stiffened. Patton entered without unnecessary ceremony. His ivory-handled pistols rested at his sides, but they weren't what commanded attention. It was the certainty in his walk. He removed his gloves slowly. At ease. His voice remained calm. No one relaxed. Colonel Ellsworth presented routine operational updates before quietly mentioning the previous day's incident. Patton listened without interruption. He asked only one question. Who found the error? The colonel looked toward the rear. Private First Class Daniel Mercer, sir. Mercer stepped forward. His heartbeat pounded louder than the engines outside. Patton studied him silently. Long enough for every man in the room to become uncomfortable. You challenged these coordinates? Yes, sir. You were certain? No, sir. Patton raised an eyebrow. No. Mercer answered carefully. I was uncertain enough to ask, sir. Several officers glanced toward one another. Patton remained expressionless. You understand military discipline? Yes, sir. You understand chain of command? Yes, sir. And yet you interrupted experienced officers? Yes, sir." Patton walked toward the campaign map. He rested one finger over the corrected artillery position. "How many soldiers were moving here?" Colonel Ellsworth answered. "Approximately 380, sir." Patton nodded once. Then he looked back at Mercer. "Did you interrupt because you wanted attention?" "No, sir." "Did you interrupt because you believed you knew more than your officers?" "No, sir." "Then why?" Mercer hesitated. His voice became almost quiet. "Because if I stayed silent, I'd have been responsible too." The room stayed perfectly still. Patton looked around the headquarters. His gaze settled briefly on each officer. Then he spoke. "A good army obeys orders." Another pause. "A great army also notices mistakes." No one moved. Patton continued. "Rank carries authority." He tapped the map lightly. "But truth carries responsibility." Several officers lowered their eyes. Patton wasn't humiliating anyone. He wasn't searching for blame. He was reminding everyone why they wore the uniform. He turned back toward Mercer. "Private." "Yes, sir." "You respected the chain of command. You reported your concern. You accepted responsibility for speaking. And because of that." Patton allowed another brief silence. Hundreds of Americans continued marching instead of becoming casualties. Even veteran officers felt something shift inside the tent. The general removed a small case from an aide. Without raising his voice, he announced that Private First Class Daniel Mercer would receive formal recognition for exceptional presence of mind under operational pressure. The next morning, beneath gray German skies, soldiers assembled near headquarters. Mud still covered their boots. Most hadn't slept much. The decoration ceremony lasted only minutes. Patton pinned the medal onto Mercer's uniform himself. No dramatic speech followed. No photographers crowded around. Only one sentence. "You remembered that courage begins before the shooting." Mercer saluted. "So did you, sir." Patton returned the salute. Around them, soldiers watched quietly. Some remembered firefights. Others remembered friends who never came home. Nearly all realized how close they themselves had come to becoming names on casualty reports because of one copied digit. Later that afternoon, Mercer returned to the same radio truck where the entire story had begun. Another transmission arrived. Another list of numbers. Another operation. Nothing about war had become easier. He still checked every coordinate twice. Sometimes 3 times. Not because he distrusted his fellow soldiers. Because he understood they were human. Years later, many veterans remembered fierce battles, burning towns, shattered bridges, and impossible marches across Europe. A few also remembered a quiet radio operator who had risked his reputation instead of risking other men's lives. His courage wasn't measured by charging a machine gun nest or throwing a grenade. It was measured by speaking when silence would have been safer. War often celebrates victories won with tanks, aircraft, and artillery. But sometimes history quietly turns because one exhausted soldier dares to say, "I think something is wrong." In a conflict that demanded obedience, Daniel Mercer proved that true discipline also required honesty. And General Patton reminded everyone who witnessed that moment that leadership is strongest when it welcomes responsibility instead of protecting pride. Because in war, the smallest correction can save the greatest number of lives. What would you have done? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want more World War II stories where humanity, war, and difficult decisions collided, make sure to subscribe.